Today, we're going to be taking a look at the Kinera Bd005 Pro, a hybrid budget IEM that comes in at $50. A lot of times when I'm preparing to review a budget IEM, I'll set my expectations kind of low, unless it's a company like Kinera. This is Audio In Reviews. Okay, so let's go ahead and talk about the design, build, comfort, and isolation of the Bd005 Pro. I absolutely love the design of these. This is probably one of the nicest IEMs in the $50 price range that I've ever had. The build quality on these is excellent, and the design is excellent as well. You can see here that the faceplate has the Kinera logo on here along with some gold flakes in there. The finish, when you look at it in person, is just quite nice. Again, I think the best probably in the $50 price range that I've seen. And you can when you looking closely here, you can barely see where the faceplate seam is that goes along the edge here, so they hid that really well. The nozzle, it's got a metal nozzle for the ear tip, and it has a little screen on there to protect it from debris. The nozzle is a little bit on the short side, but honestly, with proper tips, I was able to achieve adequate insertion depth, so that didn't seem to be an issue for me. And as far as the shape of the IEM itself, it almost has a custom kind of fill to it, so it sits very comfortably in my ear. And so as far as build design and just the overall the quality, the fit, and comfort, it's quite excellent with the Kinera. These are a hybrid IEM, so they do have the two different types of drivers. They have a dynamic driver for the bass and a balanced armature driver for the mids and the highs. Now, as far as the cable is also quite nice. I would even say, again, a little nicer than what I would expect from a $50 IEM. This is nicer than most cables that come with other budget IEMs. It's got the 2-pin connector, it's a 3.5 terminal, and the cable itself is quite soft. It does have the ear hooks on it, but the shape is quite nice, and it fits nicely behind the ears. It also has this nice case here with the mesh net, so you can put ear tips or anything else you want in here. And you've got 6 ear tips, or 3 pairs of the small ear tips, which these are too small for me, and I do have other tips, so that wasn't a problem. But as far as the overall package in the $50 price range, I think the build, design, comfort is excellent. As far as isolation, these are also, I would say, about average. So great package that's put together by Kinera here for the $50 price range. Okay, so let's go ahead and talk about the sound. Okay, so let's talk about the overall sound signature of the Kinera Bd005 Pro. It has what I would consider to be a warm V-shaped sound signature. So you're going to have elevated bass, recessed mids, and elevated treble. So if you look at the graph, what you're going to see again is you're going to have some elevated bass, and their highest point is going to be right at around 40 hertz. And when you start to come into the bass and the mid bass, of course, you have it starts to kind of decline into the mids, and again you have the recessed mids. It bottoms out right at around 800 hertz, and then past the 800 hertz point, starting to go into the mids and the upper mids. You have a peak at around 2K, then a peak at 4.5K, another larger peak at around 7.5K. Past the 7.5K point, you have a significant drop off, and once you get in around 10K, past that 10K point, there's not a whole lot of upper treble presence. There is a small little peak past 10K. I think it's right at around 18.5 or 18K, but it's not a very significant elevation there. Okay, so when you look at the treble frequencies on the graph, again, we talked about that peak at 7.5K, and then you have the treble roll off past that point. So by the time you get to 10K and beyond, again, it just continues to kind of decline until you've got that little bit of a hump right at around, I think, 18.5K, but not very significant. And what that does, those frequencies past 10K, in that frequency spectrum, are responsible a lot of times for the air, like in a live recording, and can really kind of contribute to live recordings having that open, spacious kind of feel to it. So that did seem a little bit lacking, but as far as the openness, I mean, there was still enough to give a pretty good sense of openness and space. So as far as sound stage, the sound stage is, I would say, about average, not super wide. It's not intimate. Instrument placement and imaging is good. I would say about average. There seemed to be a good amount of density with the instruments, and so it's pretty easy to kind of tell where the instruments are, where the vocals are. And you even have a pretty good sense of depth as far as forward depth also. And so the sound stage is average. So I still got plenty of enjoyment listening again to live recordings. Electronic sounded really good on these. And listened to Jazz at the Pawn Shop, sounded pretty good. So overall, I would say, but as far as the treble presentation is a little bit on the safe side, a little more of a relaxed presentation. Okay, so coming out of the treble into the mids. Okay, again, in the treble, you've got that 7.5K peak. As you come further down, you've got a peak at 4.5K, and then it comes back down again. Then you have another peak, lower peak at around 2K. Past 2K, it begins to recess into the mids and bottoms out right at around 800 hertz. Female vocals seem to be slightly closer, a little more forward than male vocals. Again, because you have those recessed mids, what that can do is sometimes create a little more distance between the listener and some of the instruments. But I would say that it's not too far away. I would say there's still a good amount of presence with vocals and lead instruments. That 2K peak, I think that might be responsible for kind of pushing some of the higher notes in some instruments a little more forward, and maybe the lower saxophone notes might seem a little more further away. The female vocals seem to be a little more forward than male vocals. Now, once you get past the 800 hertz point, it starts to go back up into the lower mids, and it's a pretty substantial elevation there. And what that does is that gives really good body to male vocals and to some of the lower notes in the lower notes in saxophones and lower notes in piano and synthesizers. Also some of the drums, toms have a little more of a warm tone to them. Now as far as detail retrieval in the mids, I would say it's about average. There's pretty decent layering and decent texture. Again, I would say about average. So moving out of the mids into the bass, again, it's a V-shape, kind of a warm V-shape sound signature. So the bass is pretty elevated. I wouldn't call these a bass head IEM by any means, but I would still say it falls within that fun tuning category. There's still enough bass presence to give it that fun kind of listening experience. Now, as far as, again, you have that dynamic driver that's handling the bass with these. So you've got a good amount of punch, a good amount of slam. It's not, of course, it's not a BA driver, so it's a little bit of a slower bass response. But I would say there's still an adequate level of control. I would say as far as texture and layering, it's about average. But the overall bass presentation, I would say, is very, very good with this. Now, and again, going back to the overall sound signature, you have that warm V shape. So when you get the lower mids and the mid bass are pushed a little more forward. So again, that's going to give you that nice full tone in like floor toms and some of the higher bass notes, like in a synthesizer, and it's going to give you pretty good texture in those lower mids and mid bass. Now and again, I talked about how the highest point of the bass frequencies is right at around 40 hertz, and that's pretty low, and that's elevated pretty. It's just a pretty substantial elevation right there. So again, that gives you a really good amount of sub presence. And again, it's not the fastest, but it's still pretty well controlled. I would say this is this dynamic driver does a pretty good job handling all those really low notes. And again, talking about as far as genres, I think my favorite genre of music with this IEM was probably electronic. This thing does electronic very well. So I would say overall, with the tuning of this IEM, the build quality of the shell, build quality of the cable, the design is really, really nice. Comfort, isolation is good. I would say this is an excellent offering by Kinera. Again, I talked about it at the beginning. Sometimes when I'm preparing to review a budget set of in-ear monitors, I kind of will set my expectations low, and I'd rather be surprised than set them too high and be disappointed. Except with companies like Kinera, and there are other companies out there, I think that they really try to do their best and put their best foot forward when it comes to budget IEMs, because they know that we all can't afford $800, $1,000, $2,000 IEMs. And so I love when a company puts out a $50 budget IEM and they pay close attention to what is going to meet the consumer's needs. And again, it's not going to break the bank. And I think Kinera did an excellent job at doing that, meeting the consumer where they are, and just developing a really, really nice set of IEMs. So thank you so much for watching this video. Please like, please share. Again, I hope you guys have a wonderful day. We'll talk to you later.